let's discuss and look at some options as to how to put the content together to create your presentation for the photo series. Once you've shot your content, you've got your raw files from your camera, then we need to work with them and lay them out on a 16 by 20 inch piece of paper, which we're going to print, and we will have that on Crit Day. Now, if you feel more comfortable doing this in Photoshop, of course, you can. Lightroom Classic is not the most intuitive program, and so if you do feel more comfortable in Photoshop, feel free to create your 16 by 20 file, and you could cut and paste and lay out the images in different layers in Photoshop. Just make sure that when you create your document, you're creating a 16 by 20 inch piece of paper at 300 DPI. Another possibility, if you don't want to use Lightroom, is that you could do this in Adobe InDesign. And again, make your document 16 by 20 inches vertical or horizontal. And you can just bring in picture boxes. You could use guidelines and you could create your layout that way. And just make sure that each photo doesn't go too far under 300 DPI, because that is what looks good for print resolution. Please do not use other programs like Microsoft Word. It's got to be done in Photoshop, InDesign, or third here in Lightroom. Now, Lightroom is probably the fastest way to do it. It's air quote the easiest way, but again, sometimes things can be a little bit awkward trying to fill up the paper and make everything look even Steven. So launch Lightroom, and you might need to go and create a new catalog, or you may want to go to the location where you put the content for your presentation or photo series. I decided to put mine in a folder on my desktop. I brought in the photos that I want to use. And then you might need to import that content on the left, and then you might have to move to the right and import again if it's a brand new location or catalog. I'll leave that to you. Once you've got everything in the library and the photo content is where you need it, you'll see that it's got like these little thumbnails, and you'll see like a little bit of a grayed out or ghosty like image of text that says 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So for this series, we're going to go anywhere from 6 to 11 images arranged and composed and laid out on a piece of paper that is 16 by 20 inches, if I didn't say that already. And you can go square, you could go rectangle, you could have all photos the same size, they could be different sizes as long as it's balanced and well laid out, and it works. So in the library, once you've got the content that you need, and then you'll see down below a thing called the film strip, and now you know that you're ready to go. You'll want to go perhaps to develop. If you haven't individually cropped images in Photoshop and changed levels ahead of time, you can do that in InDesign in the area called develop. That's a call back or a throwback to, times when people would literally develop their film or create prints inside a darkroom. So this is our digital develop area, and you'll notice on the right-hand side, you have some options. Probably the most popular thing that you'll want to do is the following. You'll want to go to the crop tool right here. It's the two little L's. And then when you hit the crop tool, you'll see that it just says original. And then if you click that tiny little arrow flyout area, you can create a ratio. Now you could just crop it to whatever size you want, but you can also stay consistent. I've decided to go with squares. So I'm going to select 1 by 1, and then you move the image around. When you've got that cropping to where you want, double click. Now, another option is if on your organization, on your 16 by 20 layout sheet, let's say that for the purpose of composition, you would like to flip a photo because it makes the presentation look more balanced. You can totally do that. You can flip things if you want to. So let's say hypothetically, I wanted to flip this photo because I think it looked better in my composition. You can go pull down menu, photo at the top, flip horizontal, and you can see it switched there. So maybe you don't want to do that, but you can if you want to. Another popular way to alter or edit is to come to the exposure settings. Now remember, we want this to look good as a print. And sometimes what we see on the screen doesn't always look so good. It sometimes can translate and look a little bit dull. So you may, if you feel that your image looks a little bit dark, you could amp up the exposure, but of course going too much will blow things out and it won't look right. You could add contrast, high and low, making lights and darks more extreme. That's another popular one, but again, we don't want to do too much to alter the image so that it looks freaky, but a little bit of change is okay, particularly if you feel that it enhances the idea of your photo series. Another popular one is saturation down here. You can amp up colors and make them more lively. You could desaturate colors. It's your call. Again, I wouldn't do too much, otherwise it might make your imagery look fake or kind of awkward. Vibrance is another slider you could use to enhance color saturation. And so for all of my images, I've amped up the colors just a little bit because I wanted the gold to show up, because there was a goldy kind of yellow color that I thought was holding everything together. And then when you crop and change anything like, the saturation or colors, you'll notice that down in the film strip, you'll see tiny little icons in black and white that will say, this image has been edited from its original content, from your original raw file. And it'll remember that. So when you exit Lightroom and when you open up this catalog or this folder again, your changes and your edits and your cropping will all be there. It is possible also that you can change the angle of the photo if you feel that something is just a little bit wonky in terms of its left to right angle. You can move things tilting to the left or tilting to the right if, for example, your photo series idea requires that. If your sliders in Lightroom aren't dialing in to exactly what you want, you can always just double click on the number, type in what you want, the value, hit tab, and you're done. Once you have cropped and adjusted all of your images to what you think you're going to use for your final series, and who knows, maybe you don't feel that you need to crop anything, but it is an option for this assignment, then we're going to go to the print area. Now, this is where we're going to put everything together, unless you're using InDesign or Photoshop. Now, we know that, we could choose single image, and this might work for you. You never know. It might work just going single image, coming over to the side, like we've done on some previous technical assignments. And you could just choose a contact sheet from something that's already made. And you could get rid of scrolling on the right-hand side, say I don't want photo information. And then you can change margins. We're going to go with a 0.25 margin or approximate for our assignment. We don't want to go with bleeds. So please don't have photo content going all the way off the page, or don't have photo content touching or too close to the page. Because if we get things too close to the edge, when we send it to printing services, it'll all get chopped off. And so it's nice also to have a clean white border on the outside. So don't have anything go right to the edge, at least 0.25 of an inch on margins. And as we know, we can take page grid over here on the right, and we could begin to just, change what we want. So let's say I've kind of got this series going, and then we can change cell size as well. We can change the space in between. And so that can be one way to do it, but it does get a little awkward sometimes. I can change my margins on the left and right, and I can start to center my content. But here's the problem with the regular contact sheet is that it just might be that our images don't fill the page, and it ends up looking kind of just like there's leftover space, and it just doesn't look as good. So part of the challenge of this assignment is uploading a 16 by 20 piece of paper that's got your images on it that fills the space. It looks intentional. It's got consistent internal margins. In other words, like all the spaces inside the images are the same. And this just doesn't look right. If I could get it to fit, if I made my images a little bit longer horizontal, I think it would have worked, but I will leave that to you. Another option is to come up to the top right area and go to Custom Package. This allows you to bring in what you want. So if you scroll down a little bit, there's a little thing that says Page Grid. It says right underneath Guides, Show Guides, and then if you click Page Grid, you get a really light blue horizontal vertical lines that allow you to place images and line things up. The next thing we want to do in Custom is come down to Custom File Dimensions. Make sure that you've got a check mark on Custom File Dimensions. If you don't, it'll just go to 8.5 by 11 paper. Now we're going to go with a 16 by 20 sheet of paper for this, and I'm going to go landscape. So I'm going to go 20 inches by 16, type in the values, and then hit Tab. And so now what we can do is we can bring in, we can bring in single images from the film strip. You can drag your content into the contact sheet. And this, for some of us, might be the easier way to do things because it allows us to just move things around and visually try stuff out before we commit to the final layout. We want to try something that works. And you can use these blue lines to line things up and keep your spacing consistent. Now, unfortunately, Lightroom does not have a zoom feature. When you're in the print area making a contact sheet, unfortunately, you can't get a magnifying glass. You can in the develop area, but not in print. And you can't, unfortunately, go Command plus and zoom in. So again, like I said, Lightroom is not the most intuitive program, but this might be, for some of us, the easiest, quickest way to make our contact sheet. Now, I'm going to play around with this a little bit, and as you move things around, you might find that there is a default size for your cells, but you can take the left corner and you can increase the size. If you pull the corner, that will make the image bigger without distorting it. If you just pull on a side, you're going to zoom in and change the proportion. You can also type in adjust selected cell. You can type in a value. For example, if I were to go 5 by 5 inch. And that's a quick way, an easy way to change your cell size as you work on your layout. Another thing you might want to try is a small inner stroke border. Let's say, for example, you've got a photo that has, or maybe a lot of your photos have white. And sometimes it helps, instead of just having nothing, like here, white in the photo going to white paper. It could work. You don't have to have a border, but if you feel that your presentation is stronger with a small separation, you select inner stroke. And you can change the width of that. I would recommend not going too thick, because if you've got a really thick, dark border around your photo and then it hits white, you might find that that's really distracting, and your margins, the spaces in between your photos, dominate the composition. They might become too distracting, or they may overpower the images themselves. So I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to try and figure out a good layout, and then I'll come back with something that hopefully looks better than this. All right, I think I've got a layout that I am much more happy with. It took some fine tuning with the size and moving things around. I'm gonna have to go back on a couple of things that I said earlier, guys. You don't have to fill up the entire 16 by 20 page. I think that's a bit of an advanced player move, because if you know what I mean, like if everybody has different sizes of photos, not everyone's is going to fit proportionate to a 16 by 20 completely perfect. So what we're going to do instead is, yes, leave at least 1/4 of an inch or 0.25 around the outside on your margins. And inside, make sure that the space that you start to use is consistent throughout the entire piece. So if my space is looking like this, then I want to make sure it's the same all the way around. If I have a little bit of leftover room, we can leave that on the periphery and crop it in Photoshop. So yes, try to maximize the full piece of paper. Why not? Use it. We've got it available. Don't make your print too small. But if you feel that cropping your image on the outside makes your composition stronger, we have the option. The other thing I have to go back and talk about is making the image bigger by dragging the corner. Yes, you can, but if you just drag it at random from the corner, you'll probably notice that your size of the images is getting out of whack. So you can see here that my selected cell is not the same height as my width. So what you've got to do is grab the corner, press Shift, hold down Shift, and when you're left clicking dragging with Shift, then it will keep your height and width consistent. In this case, you can see 6.33 on both sides. Okay, so taking back what I said about filling the whole paper, you don't have to, just make it as big as you can. And it's important that the internal margins are consistent. If outside needs a little bit of cropping, that's fine. Keep it square, keep it rectangle, but consistent inside. Okay? Hope that's easier. When you click on your images inside this custom package area, there's a little bit of a snap to thing. So I know we can't zoom in, but did you see that? Like kind of just, it's like a little tractor beam sucks it right in, and it will kind of try to align itself to the other images beside, above, below. It kind of snaps to or gets sucked into the right alignment. Now, think about your composition. Think about how the viewer's eyes are going to move around. Now, one thing I found I had to do with mine is I had these yellowy golden images, and when they were side by side, it became way too distracting. So I had to separate them, and then I've kind of got the green, more images of these vertical pans, some of which are yours, by the way, from class. You might recognize them, and some other vertical pans that I just found online. This was my idea that I was just trying for the purpose of demo. So layout, a composition or arrangement of images that keeps our eye moving. We don't want to get distracted or stuck with things that look too much the same beside each other. You'll want to think about leading lines and how it can bring us into the middle of the image and not want to just fall away. The center area is a particular spot that will look good for some images and not for others. So think about asymmetry, symmetry, leading lines, radial balance, and we want to try to create some kind of even weight or arrangement that makes sense, not just in terms of individual images, but there's a flow. Everything kind of holds together as a series in terms of all of the images, creating an overall sense of composition. So once you've got your arrangement and it's as close as you can get it, then we'll come over to the right-hand side, scroll down to the bottom right, make sure that you select JPEG file. That's what we're going to output for this assignment. So again, please do not give me a Word document. Please do not give me a random Word turned to PDF. It needs to be a JPEG file output that is a 16 by 20 inch piece of paper, or that's what we started with, and we're using either Photoshop, InDesign, or Lightroom. So we select JPEG file. We'll take off draft mode. We're not going to print a draft. We're going to print a good copy. Beside file resolution, make sure that 300 ppi is typed in right here. Take the JPEG slider to the right as far as it'll go, or type in 100. We don't want any resolution to be lost for this particular JPEG. You could say Adobe RGB. That's just a little bit of a better color profile for printing. And then we are going to print to file. So we'll give it a name that will be consistent with other ways of naming files. So you'll go first name, last name, photo series. I guess I'll just say layout. And it's going to save it as a JPEG on my desktop. So I'll say save. And it's getting a big piece of paper ready. That's why it's actually taking a few seconds to save. This is a very, very large file, many, many megabytes of information. And then to finish, I've got this awkward bit of white over here on the right-hand side. I could have filled it up. I could have gone back if I was being really picky or perfectionisty. Is that even a real word? I could have gone back to the develop area and given my photos just a slightly bit more of a horizontal, landscapey width, and it would have filled up the paper a little bit more. But just for the purpose of demonstration, I'm going to move on. Let's say that I do want to crop this, so I left it short just to show you how to do that. Then we can open up Photoshop, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this. I'm just going to go File, Open. I'm going to go to my desktop. I'm going to find my 16 by 20 layout. And then, you guessed it, I'm going to go to the crop area in Photoshop. And then I'm going to bring it over so that it is more consistent. And I haven't got too much excess white paper. And it's good to go to the printer without them having to crop anything, without Mr. Peel having to crop it or trim it. And again, we are leaving at least 0.25 of an inch all the way around. And if you just want to check to see what the size of your image is and how it's going to look when it comes out of the printer, you can go down to Image, pull down menu, about halfway down, Image Size. And because your output in Lightroom was 300, we don't have to change that. It's already good to go. And yeah, I guess it's not surprising because I went with square format for my images. I've got essentially a 16 by 16 inch piece of paper at high res. So if you want to maximize your print and go a little bit bigger than that, you can. If you want to fill it right up with 16 by 20 size and not crop it in Photoshop at all, that is fine too. So I'm going to save my result. And remember, this is a JPEG, so when you save it, you want to make sure that you take the slider and go all the way to the right, select Baseline Standard in Photoshop as your file option, not the other two down below. Those are for the web. We want to go print. So make sure it's standard, maximum JPEG, and then we'll say OK. And then you're good to go. You will upload all of your raw files, and then you'll upload your final JPEG presentation.